Whitley Strieber, and you're listening to My Alien Life.
I opened my eyes and I saw a tall figure wearing a black hooded cloak. It was standing in front of the front door. The front door is still closed. And the figure begins to slowly walk towards me. And it had a hood on, but it had no face. Inside the hood is just pure darkness. And I'm telling her that they never let you escape. There was such a panic. And we run through the first door that we come to. And we're hysterical. We don't know which way to run. We're trying to get out of there.
My guest tonight is no stranger to the unusual, and she wants the world to hear her story. Amanda was so determined to find the truth, she became a hypnotherapist just to see if regression therapy would fill in the blanks. Amanda Murphy-Cail talks about her amazing journey. That and more coming right up on My Alien Life. My Alien Life is recorded high atop the Northern Rocky Mountains and is heard all over the world, and you can listen everywhere fine podcasts are found. My website is www.myalienlifepodcast.com. There you'll find links to every episode, stories, photos, and much more. I'm your host, Cam Logan. This is My Alien Life, and the podcast starts right now.
My Alien Life Podcast.
Three, two.
Thank you so much to an incredible producer, writer, and musician, Eleon, for putting together this incredible piece of music. Forever grateful to that generous man. Amanda messaged me about her incredible story, and I'm so glad to finally have her here tonight. Amanda, how are you?
Good. How are you tonight, Cam?
I'm good. It's freezing where I am. What about you?
I'm on the East Coast, and it's cold here. We've had about 3 snowstorms in the past week.
Yeah, it was really nice.
We're still digging out.
It was so nice here, and then all of a sudden it just turned, and it's just been wind. There's no snow, but wind and below zero. So needless to say, you've had a very interesting life, and we messaged a little bit back and forth, and I wanted to hear more about it. So where do we start? I'm going to leave that to you.
Well, I guess I'll start at the beginning. The first memory I actually have as a baby was when I was about 9 to 12 months old. I know I was this age because I was still in a crib, and my mother always told the story of me climbing out of the crib at 9 months old and having to be moved to a bed. I remember it was the winter because I was wearing winter pajamas. I remember standing up in the crib, holding onto the railing. I'm wearing the winter pajamas. My attention is drawn to the wall. At this moment, I remember thinking, but I'm still a baby. That's the only and last thought I had during this encounter, or any of these types of encounters that followed. I came to call these encounters the war on the walls. I don't see anyone in the room, but I know someone is there. I'm not scared. Whoever they are, they're communicating with me telepathically. And it feels as though a tiny seed is dropped into my head. that expands into many thoughts when it lands. I don't communicate back. I'm so focused at this time that I have no thoughts. I don't even think to scream or cry for my mother. It's as if no other options exist except to do as I'm told. I simply don't question it. I'm being directed to keep looking at that wall. A scene appears. Even though I'm a baby, I'm somehow able to understand things that I shouldn't yet know. The scene on the wall is that of a war. It's on the wall, but it looks like an aerial view, as though I'm looking down at it from above. I'm told telepathically to observe how, by focusing your eyes, focusing your attention, you can affect the outcome. So I'm instructed to focus, and as I do, the soldiers begin to move. One side pushes the other side back. As I focus my eyes on that side, the other side retreats. I do this over and over again. The next morning, I wake up with a fever. No other symptoms, just a fever. This exact encounter repeats often until I was around the age of probably 6 or 7.
And what part of the world, Amanda, what part of the world were you growing up in at the time?
Massachusetts.
Right on.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And each time the next morning after these encounters, I have a fever. Sometimes the fever is so high, I'm brought to the hospital. More often than not, they can't get it down. I was put in bathtubs full of ice, rubbed with alcohol, sometimes admitted to the hospital. And I want to tell them about this war on the wall, but I can't yet talk. From the time I can talk, I tell my mother that this has something to do with the war on the wall. And, of course, she thinks I'm crazy. So I begin to wake her up right after the encounters, and she would take my temperature. There'd be no fever. The next morning, I'd have a fever. And as I was growing up, I'd always tell this story to my best friends. I had no idea what it was all about. I knew it was bizarre, and I knew it was real. I included this story in an autobiography assignment in 12th grade. We were told to start an autobiography from our first memory. And this was my first memory, and this is where I started it. I remember my teacher was fascinated and wanted to hear more about it. From that time on, not a lot really happened after that. From the time I was maybe 6 to about teenage years, around 1978, we did see a UFO in Woburn. In fact, the whole city saw it. I was at my brother's house, and his mother-in-law used to monitor the police scanners. She called and told us to get outside. There were 3 UFOs. It was all over the police scanner. They had received a ton of calls and the police were also watching them. We all went outside, and there were 3 reddish round pulsating lights in the sky. They were stationary for hours. Suddenly, they took off one at a time so fast you would have missed if you weren't staring at them. But at the time, I remember I didn't want to watch them. I just wanted to go back inside. I wasn't scared. I simply wasn't interested. And the strange thing is that a couple of years ago, I belonged to a Facebook group called History and Memories of Woburn, my hometown. Someone had posted asking if anyone recalled the UFO sightings during the 1960s. The 1960s is when the wall on the wall encounters happened. And according to the people's responses, there were many UFO sightings. I had no idea that there ever was. And someone also recalled the UFO sightings in the 1970s, which would probably be the same ones that I had seen.
And what year was that again, Amanda?
It was 1962 that this all began.
But you saw the UFO what year?
The UFOs would have been 78, right around 1978.
And about how old were you then?
I was 16.
16. So you remember that really well. And did you ever recall, I did a podcast called That Night in the Berkshires. There's massive sighting of UFOs in the Berkshires and in many places, in Massachusetts. So it's really not unusual. And can you describe what you saw that night? We're going to back up and talk about the early childhood too, but of course, what was that? What did that UFO look like, or how many were there?
There were 3 of them. They were red. They were pulsating, and they were kind of together, lined up next to each other. And one took off, and the next one took off, and the third one took off. They just kind of hung there for hours. And like I said, it was on the police scanner. I guess the whole city was out there watching them.
And I think that time, early 60s through even in the 80s, there's so many sightings in that part of the United States. It really can't deny that there was something unusual going on. And there's so many people that had stories. Did you ever talk to anybody else that had other UFO stories?
No,
from there?
I mean, this took me half a lifetime to even entertain the thought that this could be related to UFOs. Even though all these things were happening to us, my family, my kids, we thought what was some of the things that were happening to us were ghosts. We considered that it was sleep paralysis. ET encounters were the last things on our minds. As far as I was concerned at the time, that was something you read about in the Inquirer. I didn't believe in any of those things. So, as time went on, nothing seemed to logically fit all of the experiences we were having. It took a really long time.
What you saw on the wall, was it a static image, or was it a moving picture like a television?
It was as though it was back then we only had tiny TVs,
Right.
This would have been like a TV that covered the entire wall.
Wow.
And it was always the same thing. And what amazed me is, during all of these encounters, the focus you have in your mind, it's as though nothing else matters. There are no other thoughts. You're just so into the present moment. It's amazing. And in some of the later encounters, your mind goes through a mental checklist. Is it this? Is it that? And it's amazing to me how many thoughts can go through your mind in just a few seconds. But many of the later things that happened were quite terrifying. The events that happened when I was young, that they didn't scare me at all. It really didn't.
Let me ask you this.
That happened.
There seems to be, with some people, they're shown wars and things that really have ripped our world apart. Did it ever make you wonder why this was being shown to such a young person?
I couldn't even imagine. And even growing up, I had no interest in history, no interest in anything military related, no interest in any of those things. I'm probably the last person that should be shown something like this.
Right.
I just had zero interest in these things. I don't know.
Can you describe what you remember in any detail of what you actually saw?
With the childhood encounters?
Yeah, on the wall.
Yeah, it was an overhead view, as though you were looking down at 2 armies, one on each side, and they, as I was told to focus, one side would move towards the other. and push it back. Then I'd be told to focus on the other side and do the same thing and push the other side back. And it was all about the focusing on it.
At that age, I know it's hard to remember, but had you ever watched anything similar to that on TV?
No, no, not that I recall. But even, at that young age, at the time it was happening, I had an awareness that I shouldn't even know what these things are.
Right. That's incredible.
I can't even explain it. It's as though all of a sudden I could think like an adult during that time. But, I was a baby.
So who else lived in the house at that time, and kind of give me a description of what the house looked like and what part of
I
town
lived
it
with my
was?
mother and father and my brother. He was 6 years older than me. It was a quiet neighborhood. Really nothing eventful really ever happened. It was the type of neighborhood you could sleep with your doors unlocked, even though we never did. But yeah, there wasn't really much going on there.
Interesting. So you had an older brother. Did you have visitors? Would there have been anybody that would have come over to the house that could have planted that in your mind, or did you feel that you had some sort of connection with that happening on the wall that went above and beyond person-to-person interaction?
Yeah, no, I don't think there was anything that really put it in my mind at that young of an age. It was just so far off from anything that I could have seen on TV or anything like that. And the fact that it repeated itself so many times, it would start happening. And it's as if I wasn't so surprised that it was happening. That's how I felt. What surprised me was that it was happening so soon. And I never considered before that, I participated in the CLICK study, the Foundation for the Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters. It was a 3-year study. And what they were trying to find was similarities in people's experiences. And, one of the questions was, did we think that these experiences could have something to do with past lives? And I never, ever considered that. But it made me think of the thought that I had, which the only thought I ever had during these encounters was like, oh my God, I'm just a baby. As if, the whole thing didn't surprise me. It was just the timing of it that surprised me. But that's the only thought I remember having about that.
What about the thought, though? What I'm thinking right now is that you were like this little person with almost a bigger person inside, speaking, thinking.
Right. But it was, it was still me.
But it was just, and you feel it was just you. You don't feel that there was anybody else.
No, I don't think that.
Or anything else.
Another entity entered me or
Right.
something, or I considered that, but it didn't feel that way.
One of the things I think you and I have in common, I have this incredible memory of when I was, less than 3 years old. And, I'll tell my mother or talk to my mother about that, and she'll deny it happened or whatever, but it did. And, I think kids in certain circumstances are able to recall a lot. And
Absolutely.
And I remember the first time I fell out of my crib, and first time I fell down the stairs, and things like that. And I was really little,
Right.
like 1 year old. So, my parents, tell me that I couldn't possibly remember it, but, I remember the temperature of the room really, and it was always way too hot. So
Yeah, the same with me. I remember being in that crib and it being too hot as well.
well, and you'd wake up with it. Did they take you to the doctor and ask you about, or did they take you to the doctor and look and to see what the cause of these fevers might have been?
Oh, absolutely.
Good.
Yeah, my mother was big on doctors. If you sneezed, you went to the doctor. But no, they never did, back then. They'd tell you to, put them in a tub full of ice or, rub them with alcohol, whatever, just get the fever down. But no, there was never really an explanation.
What about any other indicators that had happened? I'm talking physical. Did you have any marks on your body or anything else that they were concerned about or mentioned?
No.
Or that you knew of?
No. And of course, I don't think anybody was looking for anything either. When this first started happening, I wasn't old enough to speak, to talk about this war on the wall. That was years later, that I'd tell my mother about that. But, no, I don't remember anything unusual like that.
So you spent a long time, I would guess, trying to, considering what happened and trying to put a reason or a cause, right?
Well, yeah, I didn't give it a crazy amount of thought. It was something I'd talk about with my friends at a slumber party or something. But I just used, I was in awe of it. And I never forgot it. And the memory never changed. It was always, I always remembered it the same way. And it's something you can't forget.
Did you ever see any close-ups of faces or
No.
Nothing that you could really pick out?
Nope. No, I couldn't see, any of the soldiers' faces that I was looking at. It was definitely too far away. And as far as the, whoever was doing this with me, I never saw any faces, but I knew they were there somehow.
I know there's lots of instances, and they've been relayed to me in one way or another of people seeing, similar things like that in their bedroom or other parts of the house. And, it's always very unusual, and it's always some sort of scene and looking from afar. So it's not unusual. I've heard that before, but so how long did this go on, and can you put an exact, maybe a real close year of when it stopped for you as a child?
Yeah, probably it started in 62 and probably stopped around 69.
So 7 years. So you had some very vivid memories of it then.
Oh, absolutely.
So when it stopped, did anything happen? Was there anything particular that happened?
No, I've thought about that too. No, nothing. It just sort of faded away and, became a memory, really.
Was it replaced by anything else? Did anything else significant happen?
No, nothing really happened. I think the next strange thing that happened was that UFO sighting. And for a long time, nothing happened. But it seems over the years, that's how this goes. Things will happen for a period of time and then stop. And you think to yourself that this crazy stuff is never going to happen again. And sure enough, it does. It always comes back. So right now, it's been about, a few years since anything has happened. But, I always have a feeling that something eventually will.
So a few years, what do you mean? There's been something that in the last decades?
There's been a lot of things that have happened. I guess I can probably just jump around it. The first memory I have of paralysis was around November 1989. I had just had my second daughter, and I was asleep with my husband, and I woke up, and I was completely paralyzed. It was the first time I was ever paralyzed. And at the time, since I had just had my daughter a couple of months ago, I was actually sure that I was having a stroke. I could only move my eyes, and in the bedroom there was a double set of windows on the wall, and I could move my eyes to see the windows. And the first thing, when these things happened, this was the first time, but in the times after that as well, it seems my eyes always shifted to the doors of the walls, the windows, if I could see them. I don't know why I always think somebody broke in or something, but at any rate, I checked to see if the windows were open, and I didn't think that was odd at the time, but I thought it was odd afterwards. And windows should have nothing to do with me having a stroke. So I came out of it, and I could move, and I looked at the clock, and it was 3:30 a.m., and I tried to wake my husband up, but he wouldn't wake up, and he had to get up at 4:30 in the morning, so I didn't push that because he only had another hour to sleep. So the next day I told my husband what happened, and he told me that at the time that was happening with me, he had had a horrible dream, and when he woke up, it was 4 a.m., and he had to get up at 4:30, so we just stayed up. So, that I don't remember anything else except just the paralysis, and I never related that incident with anything else that had happened. I didn't know what was going on. I really thought it was having a stroke or something. Then, I guess the next earth-shattering thing that happened was in the spring of around 1996. I was asleep in my living room on the couch, and it was around midnight. And I had just laid down, and I was awake trying to fall asleep. And the couch was positioned strange. It was near the front door, but when you walked in the front door, the back of the couch was on your right. The foot of the couch was against the wall next to the front door. So in order to get into the rest of the living room, you had to walk along the back of the couch. So I was lying at the head of the couch with my feet facing the wall next to the front door. And I was laying on my right side, partially leaning on my back, facing the back of the couch. I opened my eyes, and I saw a tall figure wearing a black hooded cloak. It was standing in front of the front door. The front door is still closed. And the figure begins to slowly walk towards me. And it had a hood on, but it had no face. Inside the hood is just pure darkness. And I perceived it as a male. And I'll tell you, I was terrified beyond imagination. I tried to get up. I couldn't move. I can only move my eyes. And again, my eyes go to the window. I can see part of one window to my left, and that's still closed. And the creature looked exactly like the Grim Reaper, minus a face and a sickle. And it's about 6 feet tall, maybe taller. It slowly moved towards me, and it leaned over the back of the couch directly over my head. And it's staring at me, and it absolutely has no face. So I'm looking into this hood, and it's pure, deep, total darkness. I can't see the back of the inside of the hood like you would if there was no head in there. It looks like the darkness in the hood just goes on forever. I was so terrified. I mean, I was sure I was going to die. The only thing my mind can come up with that this is a murderer dressed as a reaper. But the door's closed, the window's closed, and it has no face. It's just the moment when nothing makes sense, and that's one of those times where your mind goes through this mental checklist. Is the door open? Is the window open? Did somebody break in? Are they going to kill me? Are they going to rob me? And your mind's going through this checklist, and once you get to the end of it and you have no frame of reference for this, I mean, that's really when the terror sets in. So, this thing continues to stare at me, and I begin to feel as though I'm dissolving into the couch. Just dissolving. It's not painful. And I'm actually okay with it if it gets me away from this thing. The last thing I remember about this is dissolving into the couch. I woke up the next morning and completely shocked to be alive. And that figure was seen in my house numerous times from around 1996 to approximately 2000.
As a part of sleep paralysis or
Well,
in other ways?
For a long time, you know, at that time, I told myself it was a ghost.
Right.
And I didn't tell my kids about it because I figured they'd never sleep again. And, you know, at some point, my oldest daughter, came to me and said that she had seen this figure, you know, and she was describing the same thing that I had seen. And, you know, she was a teenager at the time. I told her about it. And we didn't know what to think. You know, we really thought it must be a ghost. And at one point, you know, the paralysis, it didn't add up with the paralysis. This is what I mean. It's like nothing would add up. And we decided at one point that it was sleep paralysis. But, you know, the thing that didn't add up with that is, you know, why are we having the same night terrors?
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
I mean, we're both seeing the same thing. So, you know, that's...
So when
when
you came to a point where you could compare notes, what was that like? I mean, what was your reaction with her and over what you saw?
It was like, oh my God, what's going on here?
Right.
We really didn't know what to think. You know, and I think deciding it was a ghost, I think it kind of made us feel better. You know, we really didn't know what to think. You know, we did a little research and read this and that, and, you know, that's where we stumbled upon the sleep paralysis, so we thought that might make sense. This went on for quite a while.
Did you ever try to get any inside help? Or outside help, I should say.
Well, we did go to, we were so desperate, we went to psychics, we went to mediums, we went to witches. They said, you know, throw the sea salt, smudge this, smudge that. You know, nothing worked. And at some point, a friend of mine who was a psychic had said to me one day, you know, just tell her to leave. And I'm thinking, oh, it can't be that simple. So in 1998, it was Thanksgiving night, we decided to try and just tell her to leave. And it did. We couldn't believe it. And things were quiet for about 6 months. We never did, you know, couldn't imagine still what it could be. And then the following spring, that would be spring of 1999, I was sitting on my front steps reading a book about reading playing cards or something like that. And my neighbor came to my door. And I knew them, you know, well enough to say hello, but we had never really talked. And they asked if they could come over and asked if I would read their cards. They had seen me reading the book, and I told them I'm just dabbling. I'm not a professional. But they wanted to, so they came in, and I did it for them. And in the middle of it, one of the neighbors, he became upset. And he tells me that the real reason he came over is because of something going on in his house. And now, me and my kids, we had never told anybody what was going on in our house. You know, I mean, we told my mother and, you know, a couple of people, but we didn't tell the neighbors. So the neighbor tells me that he's almost 60 years old and he's afraid to go in his house alone. So he said, I asked him, you know, what's going on over there? And he says he's seen a tall figure wearing a black cloak and it has no face. He said that even though he can't see the face, he perceives it as a male. Well, I'll tell you, I almost died.
Yeah.
So I asked him when this all started with him. And he says, I remember, he says, it started last Thanksgiving night. Now, that Thanksgiving night is the same night we asked it to leave.
Right.
He said that I couldn't believe this was happening. So he said he and his wife heard their doorbell ring. The wife opened the door and nobody was there. He said a cool, unexpected blast of cool air ripped through the door and into the house. And he said he saw the figure with no face for the first time that night. So now, right at that moment, my daughter, who's 18 at the time, walked in. She came home. Now, she hadn't heard his story. So I told her, without her hearing his story, I said, tell him what happened in our house. And my daughter didn't want to. We never talked about it. But she told him, and the neighbor couldn't believe it. My daughter hadn't known his story, and she wasn't present when he told his. The neighbor was beside himself about this. He didn't know what to do. And when he ever heard, that we asked it to leave, and then it was the same night that it started with him, none of us could believe it. I mean, that was the most amazing thing. So I couldn't imagine that just asking something to leave would cause it to leave like that. I had never heard of that. So I couldn't help but test the theory. So I asked it to return. I just had to see if the thing would come back. And sure enough, much to my disbelief, it did. And my kids were so mad at me for asking it to return. And after that, it appeared at our house until around, the end of 2000. And my neighbor had it many years beyond that.
Any stories you can relate that to us tonight about that your neighbor would have had, how they interacted with this, whatever it was?
It was the same exact thing that happened with us. You'd wake up paralyzed, and he'd see the black hooded figure, and it would be staring at him. And then after that, he also began to see, which I never saw, was a figure wearing a black fedora hat. Oh. And he would talk about that a lot in the later years, but it did get to a point where sometimes the neighbor would come over in the middle of the night and wake me up and say, it just happened, and can you come over and things like that. So, I mean, they were really upset, and we were really upset too. I mean, we were terrified. There were so many nights that I didn't sleep at all, not knowing what was going on here.
Yeah.
And at that point, the sleep paralysis was right out the window because we can't all be having the same dream, That just didn't make sense.
Wow. And there's more. I mean, you've taken the time to really document this, and you documented it really well. What was the
Well,
story?
I wish I had documented it a long time ago, because I didn't do that until I participated in the free survey.
Right.
And
talk about that.
Survey was so thorough that they wanted dates and weather conditions and all kinds of things. So that caused me to have to really sit down and, write all these things down, because as these things happened, I mean, you have to understand that when an event happened, it would be so bizarre that we'd say to ourselves, oh, we'll never forget this. And honestly, I have all these calendars where I just circle the day, but not write anything, thinking, well, this isn't going to happen again. We'll never forget this. When I look at this, I'll remember, which I remember every event, but the timing on things was tough. A lot of the the dates I had to remember based upon, other things that were going on at the time. So I wish I had written dates down as things were happening, but we didn't think this was going to turn into such a thing.
Exactly. What was the story of the black box? I wanted to hear a little bit about that.
The black box. The black box, I woke up. I had been sleeping when that occurred. And I wake up and I'm with a childhood friend that had been my best friend for many, many years. And we're on a ship, I believe to be a ship, and we're running. And we're running down a hallway. The walls are seamless, white and smooth. And we're escaping. And I'm telling her that they never let you escape. There was such a panic. And we run through the first door that we come to, and we're inside a room. There's nothing in this room except a mantle on the wall. And we're hysterical. We don't know which way to run. We're trying to get out of there. And there's another door in the room, and I want to go through that door to get away. And my friend walks to the mantle and picks up a black box. It's the only thing on the mantle. And the box is about, probably 5 inches by 5 inches. And she's staring into this box. And she looks like she's mesmerized by what's inside. And she holds it out to me in the palm of her hand. I look inside, and there's a fetus inside. It's tiny, and it's the darkest blue, almost black. And my friend seems proud of it as though it belongs to her somehow. And I'm totally repulsed by it. And I'm screaming at her to put that thing down. We have to run. And she's still staring at it. And I'm begging her. And she tells me she's not leaving without it. And I tell her we'll never get away if we take it. And I promise her we'll come back for it. I was willing to say anything at this point. And she still won't budge. Well, as this is all going on, it occurs to me that way too much time has passed for us not to get caught. And it's almost as though it dawns on me that this is some kind of a setup, like a test. And as soon as that thought occurs to me, the memory ends. So the next morning I wake up, shocked to be alive, which is usually how I woke up the next day after these things. And a couple of weeks later, I called my friend. She lives on the West Coast, and we hadn't been in touch for a while. So I didn't tell her, what happened, but I asked her if she had any bizarre things happen or things that she thought might be a dream. And so she says she didn't. So I never pushed her on it. Honestly, I didn't want her to think I had gone crazy. But that was really strange. A lot of times, I don't know, I just sometimes get the feeling that some of these things are like situations are set up somehow. I don't know.
Well, and you could also come to a conclusion that there's two different kind of realities combining. I mean, you had some sort of alien presence as well as some sort of ghostly presence. A lot of people think that they're one and the same.
Right. Well, I do think that the paranormal is definitely related to the ET things because we've had both, which is also shocking to me. So, yeah, a lot of people do believe that it's somehow related.
Tell me that story about your daughter. When you woke up one night, she wasn't where she was supposed to be?
Oh, yeah, that was crazy. My daughter, she was just a baby. She was only a few months old. And I woke up in the morning, and she was in her crib. So I panicked, and I found her laying on top of her bureau, sleeping. And now she was too young to, to get out of the crib or walk her. I think she was even too young to pull herself up in the crib. So it was the most bizarre thing. And my husband and I were dumbfounded. We don't know how she would have got on the bureau or how she didn't fall off this bureau. I was horrified. And it was just one of those things that no explanation. And then that same year, when she was still very little, I woke up in the morning and she wasn't in her crib, and I couldn't find her anywhere. And I was, 2 seconds from calling the police and losing my mind. And we found her sleeping behind a recliner chair that was in the corner of a room. So there was a little bit of space, like a little triangular space behind the chair. And she was sleeping back there. And again, we don't know how she got out of the crib. So, those things is just, there is no explanation.
And when it affects your kids like that, when they are part of it, it's a game changer. I mean, it really is more frightening.
It is. It is. There were many nights during these things where, I didn't sleep, terrified that something was going to happen to the kids. I think now that I'm older, it got to one point after one incident that I had that I said to myself, if you don't calm down, you're going to have a heart attack. I really thought I was going to have a heart attack from these things. It's the terror you feel with the paralysis, and, your mind goes through that checklist. And when you realize that there's nothing logical about this, the panic is unbelievable. And, I know a lot of people will say, well, why didn't you get a picture of something, And I'll tell you the truth. When this is going on, the last thing on my mind is a picture. The only thing on my mind is trying to live through this.
Right, that's true. I mean, people ask all the time, yeah, why didn't you take a picture of that UFO? Yeah, it's people. You're stunned.
Last thing you would ever think of would be to take a picture.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, we've actually learned, that when this happens, when you realize, this paralysis is going on, the best thing you can do is stay calm and breathe. Really, I've found that it passes more quickly, and I think the more upset you get, the longer the paralysis goes on.
There's a couple of incidents that also happened to you. You told me about. One was, and I want you to talk about both those because I'm just going to relate those to another story. But the TV on July 10th, that was in 2014, at 2 a.m. and your granddaughter had flown to California.
Yeah, my granddaughter had flown to California, and she was supposed to call her mother when she got there. Well, her mother was sleeping with the phone near her head, and my granddaughter wound up forgetting to call. But in the middle of the night, my daughter's TV came on downstairs and started blasting. So she woke her husband up and said, oh my God, I think somebody's in the house. And he got up and he went down to check, and he couldn't find anything. And, the TV kept acting weird. And then my daughter had, during that night, an episode of paralysis. But she doesn't remember, anything else, besides the craziness with the TV and all that. But, we've had craziness before with, she used to have her microwave would start by itself, and start showing all these numbers and things. And we've always had a lot of strange electronic things happen. But the TV, it never happened before like that, and it never happened again.
Wow.
So,
was there something? Did I read? I was looking through your notes, and I couldn't find it. But there was something about flies.
Yeah. During the time when we had the most things happening, we had a time when there were flies in the house, and it didn't make any sense because I'm a clean freak, and there was just no source of them. So I called an exterminator. It got to the point where, where are these flies coming from? And I had the exterminator come, and they couldn't find any source of it either. But it always seemed right before, something would happen, we'd get something like that, or we'd get like a scratching behind the walls, really crazy things. But, the exterminator couldn't find anything anywhere. So, no reason for the flies, no rodents or anything like that. And the flies just disappeared as quickly as they had come. So,
it sort of reminds,
I don't know what that could...
It reminds me of the Amityville Horror. That's those two events, the TV coming on blaring and then the flies. I mean, that's one of the creepiest things I remember. I think you and I are exactly the same age, and that was the first horror book.
I never saw Amityville Horror. They had flies on that.
Yeah. They would wake up or not even wake up. All of a sudden, there'd just be flies around, like hundreds around one window, and
yeah, that's what we had, and nobody knew where they were coming from.
Well,
it was the most bizarre thing.
We passed, when I was a kid, and I must have been third, fourth grade, we passed that book around, and we just terrorized and we're terrified for a couple of years, because every one of us in this small school read that. But
right.
You became a hypnotherapist. When was that, and why was that?
That was around probably around 2000. And as these things were happening, I was trying to do some research and figure out what the heck was going on here. And I had read some books by Bud Hopkins, like we all did. And I thought that was interesting, the hypnosis aspect of it, and how, might be able to fill in some of the blanks. So I decided I'd give it a whirl, and I went to a hypnotist first to be hypnotized and see if I felt that it was worthwhile, and I did. And then I went to class to be a hypnotist, and we did a lot of past life regression and things like that. In the end, even though I still do the hypnotherapy, I do a lot of medical cases and things like that. But I decided, for me, not to be regressed in the end. I just have so many conscious memories that, I think the regression is helpful. I think it's therapeutic. I think, it does work. But I also think in terms of research on these things, I think, we really have to separate the conscious memories from the regressed memories, from the dreams, and just kind of categorize them as what they are.
That's a lot of stuff there to take in, especially when you're going to deal with it all at once.
Right. So, even though I believe the regression is a good thing, I think I'm going to hold off for a while, since I just have so much that I do remember already. I'm not sure if I want to mix the regression in with that.
So when you're working as a hypnotherapist and people come to you, did you find any similarities that people had or anything really interesting that made you do a double take because it reminded you of your own life?
No, not really with the hypnotherapy. I haven't gotten a lot of people that want to be regressed for this type of thing, probably because I don't advertise for it. But what did remind me of these things was at one point I had seen an advertisement for something called The Reconnection, and it was a book written by Dr. Eric Pearl, and I had never heard of it, and it looked interesting to me, so I called the bookstore, and they said they had one copy, but it was an hour away from where I was. So I drove the hour to get the book, and I decided if I liked the book, I'd go to the book signing and learn more about it. So I drove the hour, got the book, came back, and when I got back on my computer, I had just gotten on Twitter. And when I checked the computer, I had a new follower. And crazy enough, his name on Twitter was The Reconnection.
Huh.
I couldn't believe this was happening. I mean, this is the stuff that happens. I was stunned. So I'm looking, and I remember sitting down and I actually looked around the room like, the hell's going on here, you know? So I wrote to this person, and I said, I know this seems weird, but, I have to ask you, this is what happened. I was going to get the book called The Reconnection, and while I was gone, you followed me, and, what made you, who are you? And he winds up writing back to me and saying that he was a psychiatrist from California, and that he's also a reconnective healing practitioner. And he said, if you're going to get involved with the reconnection, you can expect bizarre things to happen. So now I'm really interested.
So is he talking about the same type of reconnections that you're talking about?
Yes.
Or is he, okay.
Yes, the book, yeah. Yeah, what it was The Reconnection was a book written by Dr. Eric Pearl about this healing modality that he was actually teaching to people. So when I checked on the book signing thing, I'm thinking, I'm going to go now, this is really interesting. I found out that he was actually doing a class in Providence, Rhode Island. So I was in New Hampshire. I decided I'd go to the class. So I spent the weekend in the class, and I was lucky enough that Dr. Eric Pearl taught this class, which he's just a really interesting person. And one of the things that we did a lot of things, but in the end, to make a long story short, you would use your hands to kind of manipulate energy to heal people. So they teach you how to recognize energy and things like that. So at the end of the class, he had separated the class, and he had some of the people lay on the table, and he told us to put our hands behind our backs, and instead of using our hands, to use our eyes. And the last thing he said in the class was, it's really all in your eyes. And it reminded me of that war-on-the-wall stuff when I was a baby, about using your eyes to affect the outcome.
Right.
And I thought that was just amazing. After the class, I started doing reconnection, and I actually had great results with it. So another unexpected thing that happened was when I began to do reconnection on people, I was really surprised to find out that as I'm doing this, I tell people, if I have a choice, I'd rather not know what their complaint is when I start. And then I hope that I will find it and be able to tell them, what it is. And I began to realize that I can do that which was shocking to me. I never expected that. So, I just feel like there's some connection with all that. I don't know. It's just something that's really amazing to me.
A lot of connections. I mean,
a lot of connections, a lot of synchronicity, a lot of things. It's like a big box of puzzle pieces, that I've been collecting for 58 years. And there's so many pieces that I didn't realize were connected with each other. Even now, there are things that occur to me that I think, wow, I wonder if that has something to do with that,
Do you think things are still happening, or that you've grown enough to where you can ignore them? And what I mean by that is the fact that, when we're kids, we're so open to so many different things and we accept things, but, we really ignore things when we're adults. Have you changed that?
Yeah,
way?
no, not really. I'm not the type of person that, there's a lot of people that have things happen to them, and after it, strange things. And after that, they tend to think that everything is a strange thing, and I'm not like that. When an encounter is happening, there's no doubt in my mind, but no, it's not that things get by me at all. No, I mean, these things, you can't miss them.
The house you grew up in, do you still have access to that house?
Yeah, I still own that house, actually.
Oh, you do?
My mother passed away. I bought it, and my daughter lives in it.
Wow. So what was that like? I mean, honestly, I'm not the type of person who would go back to that at all.
Gets to a point where there's no safe places,
Right.
And I don't think it really matters. Every time I've moved, I grew up there, and then when I got married and moved to another house, things happened. And after that, I spent some time in Rhode Island because I was working there, and things happened there. As my daughter turned 18, she moved to California for a couple of years. She had things happen there. And when she came back and moved to New Hampshire, she had things happen there. Now I'm in New Hampshire, and things have happened here. So I don't think the location really matters. I don't know. I don't think it would matter where we went.
Interesting. So what's next with hypnosis? Are you still working on and practicing hypnosis?
Yeah, I am. I'm working with been working with a friend who's terminally ill for the past 5 years. Been focusing a lot on her, and these days I mostly do it for friends and family, and people who I really think will benefit from it.
What have you benefited from? I mean, what was the one thing that have kind of helped you through all this? Because sometimes I'm sure it was really difficult.
It was very difficult. Like I had mentioned before, I had one encounter where afterwards I realized that if I didn't calm down, I was going to have a heart attack. So I've found that since that time, when these things do happen, I mean, it's still terrifying, don't get me wrong, but it's not as terrifying. It's more like you get to a point where you just have to succumb. Or, you keep, if you try to fight it, you're not going to win with them.
Exactly. And I do agree. I mean, if you want them out of your life, I think you do have to ask. I've done it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in
It
awe
works.
of these experiences. I mean, they were terrifying, but honestly, I wouldn't trade them because I think it's just fascinating.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, to talk about these things, we don't talk about them a lot. In fact, I told my daughter that I was going to be talking to you tonight, and I jokingly said to her, well, if we need you, we'll give you a call. And she said, oh, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Stay over there.
Yeah.
The kids really believe with all their hearts that if you talk about these things, you will bring it on to yourself.
I believe that too. I'm 55
My daughter
years
is
old. I still
adamant
believe it.
about that.
Yeah. And I don't know why. It's I talk about it now every day. I spend hours and hours a week talking about it, and nothing's happened. So,
Right. Well, I'll tell you, if something happens to me this week, I'm going to be calling you back.
I'm ready to fight though. At any given time, I had one of my guests told me he used to keep a 44 under his pillow. Whether it be aliens, it didn't matter. He'd
It's
had
not going to
enough.
matter, but it does make you feel better, right?
Yeah. He'd had enough.
I do the same thing. I mean, I don't think there's been a day gone by that I haven't slept with weapons.
Right.
It's just the terror of, what gets me most, I really think, is the paralysis.
Yeah.
The times there were times when I wasn't paralyzed that I was much calmer. But that paralysis, boy, I wish it'd stop doing that.
One of the things that I discovered recently, that it was because of COVID, and I was reading an article about different ways to sleep. And, for some reason, I'm sleeping heavier than I ever have right now. And, I've had my wife try to wake me up, and she couldn't, and that bothers me. It's like I've always been wanting to be able to just sleep through the night and not have anything disturb me or not have any worries, whatever. And now that I sleep so heavily, that bothers me.
Yeah, it's not funny. It makes you wonder what you're up to while you're sleeping, right?
Yeah.
Well,
exactly
I mean, a lot of this, I've talked to a lot of people who, the physical experiences, there's also the strictly mental ones, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I have had encounters where, I haven't gone anywhere. I've been wide awake, and, things have happened, and then, I'm still wide awake, but I never once left. So I don't know. There's something to that as well.
There is. Yeah. It's every part of life is a mystery, and everyone we meet are a mystery. Everybody's a mystery, or has mysteries, or have experienced something. I think it would be really rare, to have people that haven't had some kind of at least one experience in their life. It would be really fascinating to get like 50,000 people and have them write down that one really profound thing and compare, because you could catalog some interesting results.
Oh, I can't believe you said that. I was thinking about that today. And, I've never talked about this publicly, and I'm sure there are millions of people just like me out there. And I don't think we're going to evolve much, humans, until we can open our minds to the possibility that these things exist, or be able to figure out what's going on. I know exactly what you're saying now.
Well, there's the thought that when we die, we go away, but, we were something before we were dead, and we're probably much more than we think we are. And, to think that type of matter that exists in this form couldn't exist in some other form, or in forms we can't even imagine, because we don't get to experience them at that level, is absurd to deny that reality, because there are so many people that have had experiences like you, and I get to talk to them every day.
Right. Yeah, and it does help to talk to people like that. I mean, it's helped me a lot, because, to be in a room with like-minded people makes you feel a lot better.
Yes.
I mean, people who know me that I've told these stories to, it's hard. I can understand. They believe me because they know me, but they just can't believe it. So it's hard for them too. Until it happens to you, and even when it does happen to you, you still can't believe it.
Right. Well, there's that too. There's that reality that people that, that could happen to that person. But, these other people who live in this brand new apartment, and it's made out of stainless steel and porcelain, and they wear the same clothes every day, and nothing affects them, they live a pretty benign and boring life, whereas, there's you.
True.
The excitement of being an experiencer. So.
Oh yeah, but it is fascinating. Even the synchronicity that comes along with it. I've noticed there's a lot of synchronicity that gets thrown in there as well. Like that guy called the reconnection while I was out getting the book. What are the chances of that?
Yeah.
It's almost, I say to myself, was I meant to go to that class, I mean, because I'll tell you, that's all it took. I was going to that class after that happened.
Right. Well, I want you to do one thing for me. I want you to keep in touch.
Absolutely.
Out of time, but
great talking to you.
Great talking to you too. And people are going to have questions, and I'll direct those to you, and they'll have suggestions. And I have some very, very close friends out there who have experienced very similar things, and I have friends who are regression hypnotherapists, and they love their lives and love to be able to share those experiences with their clients and hear even more where there's guys like me. It's like, wow, can't believe there's people in the world that do that, but thank you very much. I appreciate it.
There are some wonderful people out there.
There are, so. As are you, Amanda Murphy-Cail. She's been an amazing guest. First time on the podcast, right?
That's right, yeah.
Oh, wow, so you'll be on more. Thank you very much. Keep in touch, and we will talk soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Good night, Amanda. You can find my website at www.myalienlifepodcast.com, and please subscribe to my latest downloads at iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and at podbean.com. And please follow me and like me on Facebook and Twitter. My Alien Life is written and produced for broadcast at Studio 254 in the Northern Rocky Mountains. The music you are hearing is produced and created by Eleon. You can find all Eleon's work online at Heart Dance Records.